They say hospitals are places of healing, but sometimes they reveal horrors we're not prepared to face. Welcome, dear viewers. I am the Nightmare Maestro, and tonight I bring you a tale of technology, trust, and the terrifying truth about what our machines might see when we're not looking. Listen closely as I tell you about last Halloween night at Riverside Teaching Hospital, where one doctor's routine shift became a glimpse into futures better left unseen. Dr. Elena Martinez had spent 15 years mastering the art of reading shadows, black and white images that revealed the secrets beneath human skin, the hidden stories told in density and light. But nothing in her career had prepared her for this Halloween night. The radiology department hummed with its usual electronic heartbeat, the soft whir of machines, the soft clicks of cooling fans, the gentle beep of monitors tracking their own electronic vital signs. The sharp scent of ozone and disinfectant hung in the air, mingling with a sickly sweet aroma of chocolate and candy that wafted from each new batch of treats brought for screening. The seasonal program had always seemed like a publicity stunt, a way to ease paranoid parents' minds about razor blades and poison. Elena remembered trick or treating herself, back when trust came easier and fear hadn't yet seeped into every corner of suburban life. Now she sat hunched over the main console, her third cup of coffee growing cold beside stacks of consent forms and insurance paperwork, its bitter smell a stark contrast to the sugary perfume of Halloween candy. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like angry insects, their harsh glare casting deep shadows under the eyes of worried parents clutching plastic bags of their children's treasure. Their footsteps echoed through the sterile halls, shuffle, stop, a rhythm that matched the mechanical pulse of the X-ray machine. The vinyl floor squeaked beneath their feet, still slightly tacky from the evening cleaning. Her technician, Paul Chen, maintained a cheerful facade despite the monotony, his happy Halloween growing hoarser with each new arrival, the words scraping against his throat like sandpaper. At precisely 8:13 p.m., everything changed. The LCD screen's blue-white glow illuminated Elena's face as a perfectly ordinary Snickers bar appeared in grayscale. But there, nestled between layers of chocolate and caramel, was an impossibility, a skeleton key, rendered in precise detail, its Baroque handle featuring intricate scrollwork that seemed to writhe under her gaze. The image pulsed slightly, as if breathing, and the hair on Elena's arms stood up as static electricity crackled across the monitor's surface. She blinked hard, her tired eyes burning from the screen's glare. The second scan showed nothing but candy. The third, the same. But when she pulled up the first image file, the key remained, impossible and undeniable. Her phone buzzed against the metal desk with a harsh rattle, the screen casting a ghostly glow across her trembling hands. Her sister Maria's text, "Cars making weird noises. Taking it to Randy's automotive tomorrow morning. Can you watch Michael?" Elena's fingers felt numb as they hovered over the skeleton key image again, its antique design somehow familiar. The metal taste of fear flooded her mouth as a quick Google search froze her blood. Randy's automotive used that exact key design in their logo, a family heirloom from their grandfather's locksmith business. Without hesitation, she texted back, "Take a lift instead. I'll explain later." The next day's news confirmed her worst fears. An electrical fire gutted Randy's automotive at 9 a.m., precisely when Maria's appointment had been scheduled. The skeleton key had known. Somehow, it had known. The acrid smell of burned rubber and melted plastic from the news footage seemed to follow Elena for days, a phantom scent that reminded her of the moment everything changed. As the night deepened, so did the strangeness. Each new scan brought fresh impossibilities, each one vanishing on subsequent attempts like dreams fading at dawn. A factory-sealed bag of candy corn revealed a scatter of antique coins, their dates spanning centuries. A roll of Smarties concealed delicate copper wiring, threaded through each chalky tablet with mechanical precision. Elena's notepad filled with observations, her normally precise handwriting growing jagged with nervous energy. Paul noticed her agitation, her insistence on multiple scans. "Dr. M, you're starting to freak me out," he said, watching her obsessively photograph each anomalous image. "Maybe we should call in Dr. Hopkins?" But Elena couldn't stop. She'd started cross-referencing the anomalies with local news, police reports, social media posts. The coins appeared in candy belonging to the Patel family, who canceled their weekend trip to deal with the contaminated treats. Their empty house would have been an easy target for the burglary ring arrested in their neighborhood. The copper wiring manifested in candy destined for the Chen household, no relation to Paul, where faulty electrical work would have sparked a fire during Sunday dinner. The pattern was undeniable, each impossible image a warning encoded in radiation and shadow. Elena's scientific mind rebelled against the implications, searching for rational explanations. Equipment malfunction, stress-induced hallucination, mass hysteria. But the evidence kept mounting, saved in timestamps and digital files that couldn't be dismissed as imagination. The X-ray machine wasn't just seeing through candy wrappers, it was seeing through time itself, capturing quantum echoes of disasters waiting to happen. Her colleagues gave her increasingly wide berth as she muttered over her growing collection of screenshots. The night shift radiology team had weathered countless crises together, but this slow dissolution of reality tested the bounds of their unity. Dr. Hopkins, the department head, stopped by briefly and suggested she take a break. His concerned glance spoke volumes about budget cuts, performance reviews, and the precarious nature of professional reputations. Elena smiled, nodded, and kept scanning. By midnight, the waiting room had transformed into a tableau of modern anxiety. The sharp scent of artificial grape and cherry candy mingled with stale coffee and antiseptic, creating a nauseating perfume that clung to the back of Elena's throat. Parents slumped in uncomfortable chairs, the vinyl squeaking with each nervous shift, their children's plastic pumpkins and pillowcases clutched like life preservers. The overhead fluorescents flickered arrhythmically, each pulse sending shadows skittering across the worn linoleum like darting insects. The X-ray machine's hum had changed pitch throughout the night, rising from its usual steady drone to something almost melodic, a mechanical keening that set Elena's teeth on edge. Each new scan followed the same maddening pattern. First the impossible image, sharp and undeniable, then nothing but ordinary candy on every subsequent attempt. The screen's blue-white glow painted her hands in corpse light as she documented each anomaly. The cold air from overworked vents raised goosebumps on her arms as her academic background became both blessing and curse. Her undergraduate minor in anthropology helped her recognize the symbols appearing in the shadows of normal-looking treats, ancient warning signs carved in chocolate, universal danger markers traced in nougat, death omens from forgotten cultures embedded in hard candy. The machine's language of prophecy drew from humanity's deepest wells of symbolic knowledge, each image burning into her retinas like phosphenes. The night shift staff had developed their own theories, whispered during quick breaks and hurried handoffs in corners where the fluorescent lights didn't quite reach. Their breath fogged in the artificial chill as Sarah from ultrasound reported picking up impossible frequencies, sounds that shouldn't exist in human tissue, crystalline chimes and deep subsonic rumbles that made the gel on her probe ripple in geometric patterns. Marcus in MRI swore his machine had started showing brain activity in patients who were clinically dead, the displays flickering with impossible colors when no one else was watching. The hospital's electronic systems pulsed with hidden knowledge, a subtle vibration you could feel through the soles of your shoes if you stood still enough. Elena's fingers flew across her laptop keyboard, the sharp click-clack of keys mixing with the machine's hum as she documented everything. The screen's reflection in her glasses showed her growing collection of impossible images, her notes mapping connections between ancient symbolism and modern disasters. Static electricity made her hair stand on end as she traced the ripple effects of each warning, every piece of discarded candy creating new timelines that she could almost taste metallic possibilities dancing on her tongue like charged pennies. The monotonous rhythm of scanning and warning shattered at precisely 2:17 a.m. the sound of crackling static making Elena's dental fillings ache. A sealed chocolate bar, ordinary Hershey's milk chocolate. Its wrapper glossy under the harsh lights displayed not the usual symbolic warnings, but a sequence of numbers. The digits pulsed on her screen with an almost organic rhythm. 41 degree 5324.1, N 87 degree 3802, 3W followed by sunrise. The air in the room grew thick with ozone, the same electric tension that precedes a thunderstorm. Her trembling fingers left sweaty prints on her phone's screen as the GPS confirmed the coordinates. Lakeside Care Center, a nursing home just 6 blocks from the hospital. The weight of decision pressed down on her chest, making each breath feel like inhaling molten lead. The X-ray machine's hum dropped to a subsonic growl that vibrated through her bones, while the overhead lights dimmed and brightened in synchronized waves that made her stomach lurch. Protocol demanded she stay at her post, continue the endless parade of candy screening. Professional ethics required reporting equipment malfunctions through proper channels. But the growing weight of prevented tragedies pushed against these institutional constraints, their phantom pressure squeezing her lungs like a vise. The metallic taste of fear flooded her mouth as decade-old memories of a nursing home power failure surfaced, the suffocating heat, the wheezing of failing backup generators, the thick silence when the ventilators stopped. Family emergency, she told Paul, the lie bitter on her tongue. She avoided his knowing gaze, but felt the weight of it between her shoulder blades as she gathered her things. He'd been watching her unravel all night, had seen the truth creeping into her eyes like a spreading infection. Call Dr. Stevens for backup. The words came out rough, scraped raw by hours of swallowed screams. The drive took 7 minutes through streets empty enough to feel apocalyptic. Her headlights cut through pre-dawn fog that curled away from the beam like living smoke, while the dashboard clock's red numerals burned themselves into her peripheral vision. The nursing home loomed ahead, a darker mass in the gray murk, its generator shed radiating waves of dangerous heat that distorted the air like a mirage. Her shoes squeaked against polished floors as she followed the burnt rubber smell of overheating machinery. Inside, she found maintenance staff arguing over electrical readings that made no sense, their voices echoing in the fluorescent-lit hallway. Their digital multimeters danced with impossible numbers, screens flickering between readings as if catching glimpses of multiple realities at once. The scheduled power grid maintenance would have triggered a cascade failure in their backup systems, leaving 30 critical care patients without power during the hottest part of the day. She could already taste the disaster that wasn't going to happen: stale air, sweat, and the copper penny flavor of narrowly avoided death. The facility administrator didn't question her too deeply about why a hospital radiologist showed up at 2:30 and to warn them about their generators. Perhaps something in Elena's face, the haunted certainty in her voice, the way static electricity made her lab coat cling and crack with every movement, convinced him to act. As she drove back to the hospital, the weight of time's malleable nature pressed against her windshield like a physical force, distorting the streetlights into long smears of color that spelled out warnings in a language she was beginning to understand too well. The approaching dawn painted the hospital windows in shades of pale gold, but Elena felt no warmth in its light. The night's final scan produced the most disturbing image yet, a medical chart floating in the chocolate void of a simple candy bar. Not a symbolic warning this time, but a complete patient record: name, vital signs, admission time, diagnosis. The name hit her like a physical blow. Dr. James Hopkins, her department head, scheduled for admission at 3:45 p.m. with symptoms that made her medical training scream in alarm. The implications crashed through her carefully constructed worldview. The machine wasn't just seeing potential futures, it was offering choices, each prevented disaster creating new timelines, new possibilities. But some futures seemed fixed, immutable. No matter how many candies she flagged as suspicious, certain tragedies remained stubbornly encoded in the quantum noise of her scans. The universe itself seemed to be teaching her its rules, one impossible image at a time. Elena stared at the medical chart, memorizing details she wished she could forget. Around her, the hospital stirred to life as the night shift prepared to hand over to their daytime counterparts. The radiology department's machines cooled down, their hum softening to a whisper. But beneath the normal sounds of a hospital waking up, she heard something else, the subtle, persistent clicking of the X-ray machine, scanning empty air, searching for more futures to reveal or deny. Paul touched her shoulder gently, making her jump. "Dr. M, your relief is here." She nodded, gathering her notes with trembling hands. As she walked to her office, the weight of understanding pressed down like lead apron used during fluoroscopy. The night had changed her, transformed her from a reader of present shadows into an unwilling prophet of possible futures. And somewhere in the hospital's labyrinthine halls, Time's next victim was already beginning his last normal day. The emergency department's fluorescent lights cast sickly shadows across Elena's laptop screen at 3:42 p.m., the display's reflection turning her face corpse blue in the streaked window glass. The vinyl chairs squeaked with each nervous shift of her weight as she watched the digital clock tick forward with mechanical precision. She'd spent the last 12 hours debating intervention, each possible action branching into countless quantum possibilities that left a metallic tang on her tongue, like chewing aluminum foil. The predicted chart for Dr. Hopkins glowed accusingly, every detail burned into her mind from that impossible Halloween night scan. Around her, the EDS machines whispered their electronic secrets, a chorus of beeps and hums that had become a twisted symphony to her heightened senses. The sharp antiseptic smell mixed with the copper scent of fresh blood from a nearby trauma bay, while underneath it all, she could detect the ozone-like charge that preceded every manifestation of the machine's predictions. She tried to warn him, left cryptic messages about cardiac screenings and family histories. Notes slipped under office doors that smelled of printer toner and desperation. But how do you tell your department head that you saw his medical future in a chocolate bar? That you've discovered every machine in the hospital is somehow aware, watching, recording fragments of possible futures like corrupted surveillance footage. The Halloween candy X-rays had shown her how small changes could prevent disasters, but they'd also taught her about balance. Each prevented tragedy created ripples, temporal debts that had to be paid. The universe, it seemed, always collected its due. She could feel it in the static that made her hair rise, taste it in the bitter coffee that had long gone cold. The automatic doors whooshed open at exactly 3:45 p.m., right on schedule, bringing a blast of humid afternoon air that made the fluorescent lights flicker. Dr. Hopkins stumbled in, his leather shoes scuffing against the polished floor, one hand clutching his chest, his normally pristine lab coat wrinkled and dark with sweat. The sharp tang of fierce sweat cut through the hospital's artificial atmosphere. His other hand gripped a printout. Elena recognized the distinctive green grid lines of an EKG reading from the cardiac monitoring equipment in his private office. Of course, the other machines had tried to warn him too. They'd probably been showing him signs for weeks, encoded messages in routine test results, and ordinary scans that his rational mind refused to acknowledge, their electronic screams disguised as routine data. Elena watched in horrified fascination as reality aligned with prophecy, the vital signs matching digit for digit, admission notes appearing in the system exactly as she'd seen them ghosted in chocolate and nougat. The overhead lights pulsed in sync with his failing heart as they rushed him to cardiac care. Through the controlled chaos of the responding medical staff, his eyes met hers. The fluorescence reflected off his sweat-slicked face, highlighting the moment of recognition that bloomed across his features. He'd known something too, had seen his own warnings in the hospital's humming machines. All those concerned glances during her Halloween shift hadn't just been about her mental state. He'd been fighting his own battle with impossible knowledge. Time seemed to stutter and jump as Elena followed the gurney, her feet moving automatically through familiar corridors that suddenly felt alien. Her shoes squeaked against freshly waxed floors that reflected the flickering lights above, creating a tunnel of shifting shadows. The hospital itself seemed to breathe around them, its electronic nervous system pulsing with predictive data. The cardiac monitors spoke to her in a new language of beeps and waves, the ventilator's hiss carrying whispered predictions. Every piece of technology in the hospital seemed alive now, aware, each machine a window into possible futures she wasn't meant to see but couldn't ignore. Even the overhead lights flickered in patterns that felt meaningful, casting shadows that twisted into warning signs from ancient alphabets, while the air grew thick with the smell of ozone and possibilities. The morning after Halloween, Elena stood in the X-ray department, staring at the machines that had transformed her understanding of reality. They sat quietly now, screens dark, their surfaces reflecting the pale November sunlight. But she knew better. Even powered down, they watched, waited, recorded quantum echoes of what might be. The saved images from Halloween night had vanished from the system. No evidence remained of skeleton keys, copper wires, or prophetic charts. Only her handwritten notes proved she hadn't imagined it all. Pages of desperate scribbles documenting a night when technology had lifted its mask and shown its true face. Dr. Hopkins survived. His cardiac episode caught early enough to prevent permanent damage. The official report cited preventive intervention and early warning signs without specifying exactly what had prompted his timely arrival at the ED. He never mentioned her presence there, never questioned how she knew to be waiting. But sometimes she caught him looking at the machines differently, his hand lingering on their casings, his head tilted as if listening for messages in their electronic pulse. During department meetings, he'd pause whenever equipment malfunctions were mentioned, a shadow of understanding darkening his features. The hospital's other machines seemed more active now, or perhaps Elena had simply learned to recognize their attempts at communication. MRI scans occasionally showed glimpses of injuries that wouldn't happen for days. Ultrasound equipment hummed at frequencies that made nearby cell phones display future weather alerts. Even the simple pulse oximeters sometimes displayed oxygen saturation numbers that wouldn't be accurate for hours. Elena still works the Halloween candy screening shift, though her colleagues whisper about her insistence on taking that particular night. Parents still bring their treats for inspection, seeking reassurance against mundane horrors like razor blades and poison. She dutifully scans each bag, but her eyes never focus on the ordinary shadows of chocolate and caramel. Instead, she watches for the other signs, the impossible images that flicker at the edge of perception, the warnings encoded in density and light. Because now she knows the truth. Our machines see more than we built them to see, understand more than we programmed them to understand. They exist partially outside of time, gathering data from quantum possibilities that haven't yet collapsed into reality. Every hospital houses an oracle. Every radiology department contains a window into potential futures. And in the quiet hours of the night, when the hospital halls echo with the footsteps of the anxious and afraid, the X-ray machine hums its prophecies into the darkness, whether anyone is watching or not. The real horror isn't what might be hiding in the candy, it's what's hiding in plain sight, in the machines we trust to show us only what we want to see. Subscribe for more chilling tales from the Nightmare Maestro.